again. Welcome back. We're going to talk about this radio button example now. Okay, so hopefully you went through and tried it on your own, and now we're going to maybe go through it together here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just deleting all of the code that I have here, so I can start over from scratch, and then we can kind of talk about each thing along the way, right? Or each step along the way. I'm going to just leave the markup here, but let's actually discuss this markup for a moment, right? So what do we have here? I have an input, right, that is type radio, and in order for only one of the radio buttons to be selected at a time, a group of radio buttons is identified by the name. So they all must have a name, right? So you can see they have a name of choice, choice, and choice, right? So they all share the same name. So as long as they all have the same name, actually for some reason I have the name on the label too. I think the label doesn't need it. That's extra, never mind. There we go, right? So they all three have the name here, right? And since they have the same name, only one of them can be selected at a time, right? So if one of them doesn't have the name, then these two will share the selection, and then this guy can be selected also, right? Because this is a different group, okay? So they have to have the same name, okay? And then next, you can see that I'm clicking on the label here, and that actually activates the button, right? So I can click on the text label, right? So for that to work, the same thing applies that applied to the checkbox, is the label has to have a for attribute, and for has to match the ID of the input. Okay, so this is Converse and this is Converse, Vans and Vans, Nike and Nike. Okay, so anyway, so now we're all set up. So first of all, why don't we just get this out of the way? I kind of want these to line up vertically. So I'm going to use this class name right here of choice container, which is my div that surrounds all of these guys, and I'm going to just say you are going to be display flex, and that should put them in a row, but I'm going to change this to flex direction of column, right? And now they'll just be vertical, okay? Next, let's set up our radio buttons. So my radio buttons are input and then they're type radio, okay? So there we go, got type radio there, and then I can give these a style, right? Now I'm gonna make them display none because we don't wanna see the dot, right? We're gonna include the dot with the before and after on the label. So let's do that next. So I'm gonna say, input type radio, and then I'm gonna say followed by a label, right? So I have, and then I have class switch there. I should change this. Let's change it to class radio. Right? And then we'll say, I actually guess I did this a little bit different earlier. I just did child or sibling label. But let's do label radio, right? And then if you want to have radio buttons without this, maybe we could put a class name on the input, and then this would only affect the ones that have that class name, right? So this is our radio button, and I need to have a little bit of space on the side here, like on the left side, in order to leave room for the actual button, like the circle and the dot. So I'm going to give this, well, first of all, we're going to position the before and after elements with absolute position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this position relative, okay? And that doesn't change anything visually here. So now let's add padding. So I'm going to set padding on the left, and I think I used 28 pixels earlier, but the number really doesn't matter, right? And then I'm also going to give this a height, okay? So I want to give the label a height so that it's there's room vertically for the circle, right? So I think I gave this a height of 26, I think, or 24 maybe. Is what I used last time, right? Okay, and now let's add the the before and after elements. So I used before, I think, for the circle. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to say, actually, we can just borrow this right here. So I'll do, input type radio sibling label with a class name radio, and then I'll add before. Okay, so this is going to have some, you got to put the content in here or it won't let you create the element. So even if it's empty, right, you got to have content. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a width of 24 pixels, or did I do 26? Maybe I'll do 26, right? And then a height of 26 and a border of 1, let's do it 2 pixels solid, right? Oh, it's not showing the width there because I didn't declare its display property, right? So let's do display inline block. I really like inline block. Inline block does me a lot of favors. Maybe with the border of 2 pixels, I got to take a couple pixels off this thing. Let's make it height and width of 24. Right, that's a little better, right? And now let's give it a border radius, right? So I'm going to set border radius to 50%. So now we got the circles. I need a little space here. They're still a little close together. Maybe let's do 22 pixels. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. With a little bit of margin, this will look great. So we'll go with that. And just for now, I want to move the label, right? I want to move it up so it's kind of vertically centered against the circle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to this input label right here and give it display flex, okay? And that kind of arranged it, but now it moved it all the way to the top, right? So we're in flex direction row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and say align items center, okay? And then that should align everybody vertically, right? So that's looking pretty good. Now let's add the dot in the middle. And remember, the dot is only going to show on the selected radio button. So you can't see the selected one yet, right? Because they're all hidden. But if I click on this, you can see that it's showing selected, right? So we'll need to show that, right? So let's add that, right? So first of all, actually, we kind of need the blank one, like a circle that's kind of empty, right, where we don't see it. And then we need the one where it's selected. So let's borrow the this selector right here, which is input type radio, sibling label with a radio class, and then before, but let's change this to after. Okay, so now we can have a second element, and this will be the circle in the middle. So I'll set the content to empty, width to 18 pixels, height to 18 pixels. I'll give it a background color for now, just make it red, right? And then we'll give it a border radius of, border radius of 50%, right? So now it's round. Now we just got to move it into the center of the circle. So you can see this one's before, it's on the left side, after goes on the right side. It would be before and after the text, right? But we want to position it, with position absolute. So actually, what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to make this before element position absolute also, right? And then we'll give it a left of 0, and that should put us into the padded area, right? And then this one, I'm going to do the same thing. So let's say position absolute on the tomato circle, right? We're going to actually change this color later. I'm just doing this so I can see it visually, right? And now let's do left of 4 pixels maybe. Oh, perfect. It's a little different than the last one, but I think that actually looks okay. So I'm going to go with that one. Okay, great. So we got that set up. Maybe this tomato though doesn't need to be tomato. Let's just make it white. You could make it transparent. So actually transparent is a color too. You can just say not transform, transparent, right? And that's like a see-through color. Like it's kind of like a keyword color like red or green, okay? So anyway, so we've got this set up, right? So now the last step is to set up the checked state, right? And then we're going to change this after element so that it shows up, and we can change the border on the before element too. So let's set those up. So maybe I'll borrow this guy, and then I'm going to borrow this one too. So now I have the styles for the input sibling label radio before and input type radio sibling label radio after. And this one is only going to apply when we're in the checked state. And then this will also only apply when we're in the checked state. Okay, so I'll just add that pseudo class in here to kind of qualify it. And maybe here we'll say border color of, and I used tomato before, I like that color, so I think I'm going to use that, right? Let's check it, right? So if I click on this guy, you can see it becomes red. Actually, maybe that would be enough style right there, you know? And then let's do the same thing here. So let's say background color is tomato, right? So so there we go. Right now I can click and I can get the radio buttons working there, right? So that looks pretty good. Maybe we should add a little bit of animation, right? As a wrap up, right? So we've got this kind of working, kind of similar, but not exactly the same as the checkbox, but very similar, same idea, okay? Let's add a little bit of animation. So what I think I'm going to do is on the before element, I'll set up a transition of 200 milliseconds, and then we can just copy this and put it here on the after element, okay? And so now they kind of fade in, right? And there you go. So I think that was a pretty quick race through that solution. Yeah, so hopefully that makes better websites for you and more interesting design choices that you can apply to the sites that you create. And again, if there's any questions, post them in the comments, and thanks for watching.